making this a tribute to Kate, and I invite you all to come to the NEC next August to see Kate's gallery. So, gone in body, perhaps, but definitely alive in spirit, essence, and in quilting.
Late entrance to the microphone. I think Mr. McTavish would like to say something now. Front and centre.
I shall stand here, otherwise I'll be disturbing everybody. As a headmaster, my wife says I don't need a microphone. You judge the back row and they are reacting so fine. I'm the headmaster, or was the headmaster, of John Hampden Grammar School. Kate was there for I don't know how long. Can anybody tell me?
Nearly 20 years. Nearly 20
years. I saw the last 10 of those. When I arrived, she was very much well installed on the top floor with her stick, because at the time she had a bad hip. And she went up the stairs, 2 flights of stairs. I made a comment, I was a new headmaster. Introducing myself to people, I commented on the stick and she boomed, "It's for beating the boys with." It was quite clear from the class that was present that they loved her and this was a joke and they appreciated it. They weren't going to get me. But in a very dynamic staff room, and I'm quite moved that there are 5 of us here today from that staff room, and you can see the quality of the staff by the quality of the lady who is leading us, Ros Curtis, that it was a dynamic staff room, and she was dynamic on top of dynamic. And I learnt to be terrified by the booming voice of our headmaster down the corridor, because she had a new brilliant idea. Sometimes I could get into the door fast enough, but usually I But she produced an amazing amount of wonderful art. The boys loved her. And she helped on the stage, and she was always involved with everything. And if I had to take somebody around the school, I would always go to her art room because there was such good stuff there. On one occasion I took somebody round and they were impressed, and we went along the wall and they said, "Wow, you know, trees and cars and that and nude girl." And I said, "I trust, Miss Finch, but that is a copy of what?" And she said, "Oh no, headmaster, he did it from memory." But I think Kate's had the last laugh, because those of you who know me will know that never in my life have I worn a tie like this. Kate has the last laugh.
Right, is there anybody else who would like to say something? Jackie Wainwright, possibly?
Yes, sorry.
Don't apologise.
2 things. Memories have been brought back. One, I met Kate when I was living in Holland with my friend here, and we started a quilting group, and Kate was quite instrumental in this. And then one Christmas she decided we were going to do a flower arranging class. And we were known as Miss Jingles and Miss Bells. And we were slightly perturbed because the people who came to it were sitting there with notebooks. And we thought, we're not professionals. Anyway, it all went well. They bought our efforts, and then they said, "When is the next one?" And we thought, it's a one-off, we're so good, we only do it once, we've got to want more. And the only other thing I would say was about the BWC. Ros used to organise all the refreshments, and on a Friday we'd have a special lunch. And we needed this money, to support the club, because it was a voluntary thing. And one day we decided to do an all-day breakfast. Kate arrived in her pyjamas.
Anybody else? Don't be shy. No? Go on then.
Of course. I'd just like to say thank you to everybody. Most of what I want to say is in the match programme, fanzine, theatre programme, whatever it is we want to call it, under the section Head Over Heels. But thanks to everybody for coming. It's fantastic to see so many people from so many areas, people who've come in from Berlin and Sydney and Boston and New York and The Hague and Dusseldorf and Munich. There's
High
not
Wycombe.
High Wycombe even. High Wycombe, centre of the universe. I don't think there's many events like this that I've been to where people have come from so near and far. Thank you, everybody. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you at the pub later. Thank you.
Well, this is my contribution. Kate was a pivotal and much-loved member of the John Hampden staff room, as the head has mentioned. She worked there for more than 20 years, from the late 1970s to the late 1990s, and both colleagues and ex-pupils remember her with great fondness. There are actually so many memories, we could be here all day just retelling them, and I am indebted to those who've sent them to me. We remember, in no particular order, the extraordinary noise the art room sink would make when it got blocked, rather like a frog gargling. And Kate's dream that one day the county would spend money on a new arts centre at the school. As if. We remember her part in the Great Christmas Star conspiracy. Do you remember this, Headmaster? Yes. We'll ask him about it later. Her support and nursemaiding of Brian Lennon, the supposed head of art department. Her inventive approach to invigilation fun. Her founding of the 3 Subjects Plus Club, of which I was a member. Her no-nonsense approach to sex education, along with remarks like, "I'm just off to have sex with year 11. And their response, "We're just off to have sex with Miss Finch." We remember her love of murals. If you scratch the school walls deeply enough, you'll find scenes from Joan of Arc or Lord of the Rings. And her confiscating the weekly music newspapers. You see, it wasn't just the Beano, Sandy, it was something else too. She confiscated the weekly music newspapers, NME and Sounds, every Thursday during study break, so she could read them herself. We remember her technique for fending off the prying eyes of the senior management team by covering the doors with paintings, notices, stained glass or glitter, something that many of us lifers imitated. Her philosophy was either come in and join us or leave us alone. And then there was the Harry Ward funeral drive. I have to say that we really need Kate herself to tell this story. Indeed, it was one of her favourites and much retold at any staff gathering of the right age, as were the many and various Stewie Burt stories. Some of you here will remember Mr. Ward, he of the hand appearing round the corner of the classroom door to turn off the light, even if you were mid-lesson. As a head teacher he was, shall we say, memorable. The journey that took some members of staff to his funeral, driven by Pete Bruce, also now of blessed memory, was a riotous affair, most of the occupants of the minibus only attending the funeral, which was incidentally in Yorkshire, to check that he really was dead. Kate had responded to Harry's death in much the same way she did to the death of Margaret Thatcher. The anecdotes flowed and the laughter was continuous. Of course, she had previously arranged the alternative Harry Ward retirement party at her and Martin's house in York Road. I'm sure you remember this, Martin. And that too was hysterical, the climax being Brian Hill, head of history at the time, descending the staircase while doing a Harry Ward rant at 1,000 decibels. Wish he was here so he could demonstrate. I remember with gratitude her help with the artwork for the school magazine. I remember laughing helplessly with her at sports day commentaries and at swimming galas in the rain. I remember staff meetings and baker days, enlivened by her swiftly drawn and sharply observed cartoons and caricatures of the participants, and of her making the sort of pointed comments that would render her colleagues helpless with laughter and the speaker speechless. In school drama she was invaluable, painting scenery, making costumes, producing the programmes, stage managing, keeping the stage crew in order, shouting at Alistair Bruce, "If I see your head round the curtain once more, Alistair, I'll cut it off!" And so on. Roger Addison, the head of English, directed, but he couldn't have managed without Kate, and her art room was a place of wonder. Ex-pupil Anthony Cole Johnson, sorry baby, ex-pupil Anthony Cole Johnson came to see her a few weeks ago and exclaimed, "Your house looks just like the art room." She was latterly a member of the CDT department and brightened their staff room too. A very great number of pupils have remained in contact with Kate, as we've heard. The fact is she made a difference for so many of them. Not just the ones who were artistic, but also those Kate and I used to refer to as the Space Cadets. And Jeff Wilmore, head of religious education, and an ex-John Hampden pupil himself, called the Oddballs. And Jeff wrote this: "Her compassion knew no limits. The pupil who was written off by every other teacher at John Hampden Grammar School would be a star in art. The pupil who'd need now an SEN team of 20 to look after him would be given special Kate treatment and find encouragement and hope in the art room, which was a place of otherworldliness. Even the ones who did strange things with clay would be guided into making them less phallic." Kate told me she didn't think there'd be many people who'd want to come to this ceremony. I think if all the people who wanted to come were here, we'd probably have about 300 people. Probably just as well lots couldn't come. I think she might have been quite surprised by the real and deep grief that her death has evoked from so many people. People don't become saints simply because they've died, and Kate certainly wasn't a saint, and she knew she had her failings, as do we all. She described herself to me just a few weeks ago, with some pride I may say, and she used this term long before Teresa made it, as a bloody difficult woman. But I love her, and I want to say this to her. Kate, you were remarkable. Endlessly creative, imaginative, clever, passionate and funny, thoughtful and responsive, generous and kind, sociable and hospitable, warm, sensitive and subtle, perceptive and profound, clear-thinking and articulate. You were a great friend to a great many people. You were my best friend. You were many people's best friend. But Kate, so few of us were ever introduced to each other. And we're being introduced now, isn't that sad? She looked death in the face with honesty and dignity and calm. She was in regular contact with many friends, including Ruth Urquhart, a colleague of ours from John Hampden teaching days, who was sadly also suffering from cancer, to whom she wrote this: "There was a morning last year before I knew what was going on. I was out in the garden weeding and paused to look at the sky, and my head said, well, if it all stopped right now, would that be so bad? And the answer was actually no, as it's been a really nice time I've had of it. And to leave at a time when I'm more content than I've ever been is surely a very wonderful thing to be able to do. At the time, I was a little surprised by this thought, but now I know it was my body letting me know what was happening." And later, referring to her family and friends around her, "I cannot believe how happy I am. My head and heart seem to have decided to simply swamp me with happiness. Obviously, tears are eager to pop out, but the default setting is deep contentment, which I have to say is not what I expected. I know from my own responses that her death will have left you all with a terrible sense of loss and hurt. You're probably all bringing a mixture of uncomfortable and complex emotions with you today. Maybe you're feeling disbelief, numb, great grief or anger, heartache or lost, as well as terribly, terribly sad. But Kate's response to the knowledge of her end was absolutely in character and entirely true to the person she was. She was a true artist. It's typical of her that she spent some time at the end embroidering this length of material with what she called her cancer words. I think it was meant to be much longer than this. She didn't get to finish it. I asked her why she was doing it, and she told me she felt that if she named the things that worried her in this way, they would lose their hold over her. She documented exhaustively all she was going through. She took and shared photos, some of them very hard to look at. She shared the good news and the bad, and the moments of black humour. She made light of the pretty gruelling surgery, chemo, radiotherapy treatment, and it was all done with humour and warmth, and so much courage too. She shared it all with us. She came to terms with it. She planned and settled her affairs. She spoke to those she loved, and she made presents of the things she valued most to the people she valued most. She took us with her on her journey, and it was a privilege to go with her. The end was so hard to watch, but she was cared for with such compassion and love, and I know Martin and Ellen are hugely grateful to all who looked after her so well. Kate died in her sleep, in the small hours of the morning on the 30th of August. And those who loved her will miss her more than words can say. We now have a poem, chosen by Kate's friend Jane Leach.
Oh, thanks.
Do you want me to do it? Put yourself together. Breathe. Shall I pinch
Take that
you?
moment.
Sorry.
Here we go.
It's called Lost in Reverie, and it's by Helen Bath Swanson.
Oh, that's it. Trip me up on the... Right. Bear with me. Lost in Reverie by Helen Bath Swanson. A warm and cheery fire roars merrily, and shadows dance about the darkened room. Beside the hearth a gardener sits and dreams of sunny days, of flowers in full bloom. Some hollyhocks should tower near the fence, bright red ones the bees can't help but find. The trellis at the gate again must wear blue morning glories, or the rosy kind. To lend a bit of distance to the scene, close to the rear, I'll plant in shades of blue the tall and stately larkspur, double ones. Of course, I'll put in scabiosa too. I couldn't do without a pansy bed. Snapdragons make such beautiful bouquets. Frilled zinnias and yellow marigolds add just the proper touch to autumn days. The flowers grow and bloom with loveliness until a sound destroys the fantasy. A burning ember falls, and I must leave my garden and my charming reverie.
You see? Like nearly everything else today, this next piece of music is about as untypical a piece as you could find for a funeral. It's here because Martin chose it and Kate loved it. And it's here so we can, for a moment, shake off our grief. It's here so we can remember what Kate would be doing as it played, which is jumping around and joining in. So if you want to do either of those things, go ahead. Louder. terribly disappointed.
Should be wearing pyjamas, Kate.
That's our excuse.
In farewell, with all our warm thoughts of Kate as well as our love for her, we're now going to observe a brief moment of silence. And as we sit in quiet contemplation, you might like to select a memory of Kate as you knew her and would like to go on remembering her. Friends, we now reach the moment of farewell. Shortly Kate will be laid to rest as she wished in this beautiful woodland, with just her close family in attendance. Now, if they wish to, I'd like to ask Kate's family to come forward now, to lay their hands upon her specially made wall casket so carefully and lovingly decorated by the work of so many. And so that all here are able to be part of this moment, you might like to join them, or join in by touching their shoulders or their hands if you can't get close enough, so that everybody in the end is in touch with her. This way you're still in touch with Kate as you hold her in her hearts to say goodbye. And if you'd care to join in with the words of farewell, simply repeat with me, "We let you go," and I indicate. Come forward. And do please anybody else who would like to do so. Back. If you want to be part of this, please join in. Person in front of you, they'll be touching the coffin, and so you're all touching. Dear Kate, into the freedom of wind and sunshine, we let you go. Into the dance of spring blossom, together, we let you